Welcome to Sara Gonzales Unfiltered. Happy Friday. We are over-caffeinated here at BlazeTV, just, from our coverage late last night of the first presidential debate. I'm really tired, but something tells me I'm not going to do as poorly as Joe Biden did last night. And we obviously will have plenty of analysis to come on the highlights or lowlights, as it were, of last night. By the way, those of you who are also voting for a convicted felon, make sure that you get your merch. I'm voting for a convicted felon merch over at saramerch.com. You can use code SARA10 to save 10%. I'm just saying, if you watched last night and you're like, the choice could not be more clear and you'd like to share that message with people, I just suggest you go to saramerch.com. Go get you a coffee mug. We've got a hat too, a trucker hat to go along with that t-shirt collection. So make sure to go get you some. So like I said, we've got a lot to get into with the debates last night, but we also had some very important SCOTUS rulings or opinions drop this morning, and I, of course, have my friend Josh Hammer, senior counsel on Article 3 Project. I can't speak today, Josh. I said I was not going to be as bad as Joe Biden. I don't know. I might. Also host of America on Trial with Josh Hammer. So I want to go through three that, were there more than three, or was it just three that were released today? I know I want to talk about three. Were there more?
It's the three.
Okay. So let's go through these then. I want to first cover, I think, I don't know which one is the biggest. You could all argue that these are all pretty big, especially with the Chevron doctrine and then the January 6th. But let's start at January 6th. So Fischer versus United States. Tell us what the case, I could sit here and explain it, but I think you'll do a better job of explaining what the case was even that the Supreme Court was ruling on regarding January 6th.
Yeah, so there is a specific subsection of a statute that has been the legal basis for the federal prosecution of a lot of J6ers and perhaps of even more interest to the viewers. It's also the basis for two of the four counts in Jack Smith's indictment against Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. So this goes back to a 2002 law called Sarbanes-Oxley, and the context here is important. Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in the aftermath of the Enron accounting scandal. Now, there's an old legal principle that Sir William Blackstone mentioned a lot back in the 18th century called ratio legis, which in Latin means reason of the law. What that means in not Latin but English means we actually care about, what is the context here? Why is Congress putting these words here? You don't do statutory interpretation, Sarah, by just narrowly looking at the words. You have to look at it in the part of the statute that Congress is doing. And what the prosecutors did here is they totally ignored this. They tried to take this otherwise kind of catch-all phrase buried deep in the statute and then say that the J6ers were busting up a congressional proceeding. But Congress passed this law, which again was in the aftermath of a corporate fraud scandal when it comes to gathering evidence and documents in a corporate fraud setting. So long story short, the court today had a very sound ruling when it comes to statutory interpretation 101 first principles. They said that this is an incorrect reading of the statute. And the practical effect is that a lot of the J6ers should have their sentences heavily reduced, if not thrown out altogether. Not all of them, but those who had the statute applied to them. And unless I'm misunderstanding something, I think two of the four counts against Donald Trump in the Washington, D.C. indictment are now in very, very serious jeopardy. Those will likely get tossed out as well. Yeah. And this one was I read the obstruction of an official proceeding was the statute that you're referring to. And so I think there's over at least 300 people who were charged with this. Now, explain, because the Supreme Court said this needs to go back to the lower court and the lower court needs to reconsider the matter. But that's a D.C. court still, isn't it? It is, but they're going to have to apply this standard still. And the court was pretty clear, the four dissenting justices notwithstanding. They were pretty clear that this is just not an appropriate exercise of statutory interpretation. So I'm relatively confident that this is going to play out pretty well from here.
I'm not super confident always in the way that the Supreme Court rules, especially when I just want to point out Amy Coney Barrett did dissent with Sotomayor and Kagan. Did you read that? What could you glean from why she dissented with them?
I've only had a chance to skim it, but she basically accuses the majority, from what I can tell, of just reading their ideology and preferred outcome into the statute, which is one, really bizarre, because back at oral argument, if I recall, Amy Coney Barrett herself expressed some doubt as to the validity of this particular view of the statute's reading. More generally, I mean, you're a fairly junior member of the court. You probably should operate with a presumption that your colleagues are engaging in good faith here. But, more generally, Sarah, this is kind of the third rail. A lot of conservatives get upset when I say this. But Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh have both been very disappointing. Mm-hmm. They have not been solid picks. Even Neil Gorsuch, who's by far the best of Trump's three picks, has been generally good, but he misses sometimes. So Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are really the only two consistent case-in, case-out conservative originalist judges on the court there. Amy Coney Barrett in particular is rapidly shaping up to be perhaps Trump's single biggest disappointment, frankly, on that court.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. And then also I'd like to point out before we move on, I would like to also point out that Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote her own concurring opinion, but was one of the six in the 6-3. So that was a little bit surprising as well, because usually you see them always stick together, the liberals on the court. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's peculiar, but like I said, I mean, this is a straight up case of statutory interpretation. I mean, we're talking here about rules of construction that first year law students learn in your statutory interpretation class. It's not it's sexy insofar as it pertains to J6 and Jack Smith and Donald Trump. So it has big ramifications, but the actual legal dispute, is not a massive, separation of powers or federalism or Second Amendment, First Amendment. It's an actual arcane dispute over the specific meaning of the word otherwise buried deep in this Enron accounting era statute. So it's actually a fairly arcane legal debate. It just has massive ramifications. So, good for Ketanji Brown Jackson for being willing and able, I guess, to separate her clear ideological preferences from the actual exercise of statutory interpretation.
Yeah, you don't see that often with that side. Okay, so I want to move on to the next one here. So this is Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Counsel. And the Supreme Court, I'll just kind of give an overview, and then I want you to fill in the details here if you would. So they ruled in favor of, these were fishermen challenging the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration rule that was requiring them to pay $700 daily for an at-sea monitor. And this was like a landmark decision that they overruled from 1984 that became known as the Chevron doctrine. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Sarah, but I guess from here until the end of time, or for the foreseeable future, we will all thank herring fishermen for doing away with one of the worst administrative state decisions in the modern history of the Supreme Court. It's kind of funny how these obscure cases sometimes make monumental case law. Ever since I started law school back in 2013, Chevron deference has been a long-standing white whale of conservative and libertarian lawyers alike. So basically what happened was, back in 1984, the Federal Society, which is kind of the conservative legal movement organ, I've been a card-carrying member myself since I started law school, they kind of came of age in the 1980s when judicial restraint was very much on the rise. The problem is that sometimes when you go all in for judicial restraint, Sarah, it has the perverse effect of actually engorging or emboldening a different actor. And Chevron deference had the effect of emboldening the administrative state. It basically said that when Congress passes a statute that the courts deem is ambiguous, then they can't rule on the law. They just have to defer to the agency, the administrative agency, as long as their own interpretation is reasonable or permissible. But that's not how separation of powers works. It was Chief Justice John Marshall in Marbury versus Madison from 1803, the case that gave us judicial review. Marshall, in that opinion, said, quote, "It is emphatically the province of the judiciary to say what the law is, not the province of the deep state, not the province of the apparatchiks in the bureaucracy. It is the province of the judiciary." That is what Article 3 of the Constitution is there for. So it's a great ruling. It's a vindication for the separation of powers, and it's a good day to frankly just ultimately begin this long, slow process of unwinding the administrative state more generally.
Yeah, I also found it interesting, the dissent, which I believe was written by Kagan, but Kagan, who, by the way, it was the three liberals who dissented on this, so the 6-3 split, as you would expect. But I thought it was interesting that she said that agencies, as experts are better suited to interpret regulatory statutes than courts. And I'm like, have we learned nothing from COVID?
Right.
Are we still relying on the expertise of these people who clearly know nothing? Is that really what you're going with, Kagan? So I found that a little bit interesting as well. Okay, so let me get to this last one here. This is City of Grants Pass, Oregon versus Johnson. And this one had to do with homeless encampments, because I guess the lower court had argued that it was cruel and unusual punishment to actually tell homeless people you can't sleep in the street and you guys have to move. And the court ruled that cities in California and the West Coast, because I think there were a couple different cities that kind of joined in on this. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but they ruled that these cities can actually enforce laws restricting homeless encampments on sidewalks. And I would say hardest hit Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, real quick on the expertise point, if I can.
Please.
So what they're saying on the expertise there as part of the dissent in the Chevron case, this has been progressivism 101, Sarah, for over 100 years. I mean, going back to Woodrow Wilson and the founding of the modern Ministry of State, it was entirely predicated on the idea that the experts know better than we the people. Obviously, as you said, COVID and approximately 1,000 other things, the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, we now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that is not true. But anyway, on this Eighth Amendment homeless case here, the only surprise here is that this case was not 9-0. I mean, this is a slam dunk if there was ever a slam dunk. You have to be insane. I'm sorry, but you have to be an intellectually dishonest clown in order to possibly say that a municipality, a city or a town's general ban on public encampments is somehow an Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishments clause violation. I mean, it's clown car stuff, Sarah. So, Ketanji Brown Jackson deserves some credit certainly for going the right way on Fischer. But yet again, when we see a higher profile or a sexy constitutional case, the liberals all line up like the ducks in a row. Good thing the court got it right, though.
So I'm glad that you mentioned how insane it would be to not recognize that that's not cruel and unusual punishment. I want to read a quote here from the dissent, which was written by Sotomayor. She says, "Sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime. For some people, sleeping outside is their only option. For people with no access to shelter, that punishes them being homeless. That is unconscionable and unconstitutional. Punishing people for their status is cruel and unusual under the Eighth Amendment." Now, if you wanted to just kind of play that out, extend that logic there, I guess maybe that logic would apply to people who would like to sleep in other people's homes, because sleep is a biological necessity after all, not a crime. And so for some people, sleeping in other people's homes is their only option. I mean, how ridiculous do we want to extend this to?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, look, I mean, I could think of other biological necessities that all human beings do every day. I mean, do you want to play that game? I mean, is Sotomayor's argument that the Eighth Amendment requires that a porta potty be on literally every street corner and that taxpayers fund it because homeless people they have no place to go urinate or whatever? I mean, it's just utterly ludicrous. Look, the Eighth Amendment specifically has been one of the most frequently misinterpreted parts of the entire Bill of Rights for a very, very long time now. Liberals just read whatever they want into that particular provision. I'm not entirely sure why they do it, but yet again, here they are.
Yeah, while I have you here, Josh, I want your expertise, because you are one expert that I do trust. So obviously the debate, I mean, I'm going to talk about it later. I'm sure you watched it. It was just, I had very low expectations for Joe Biden. I frequently do. And somehow it even surprised me. But this morning, this will show you how bad it was. This morning, Chip Roy actually tweeted out, "I intend to put forth a resolution calling upon the vice president to immediately use her powers under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment to convene and mobilize the principal officers of the cabinet to declare the president unable to successfully discharge the duties and powers of his office." What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that it would, because I know that there's a process that has to play out in order for this to even happen. Do you think that it's even reasonable to expect that it will?
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I've known Chip Roy since well before he was Congressman Chip Roy. We go way back. I love the guy. I think he's one of the absolute best in all of Congress here. And as usual, his head is in the right place. I mean, this is what should happen.
Yes.
I mean, literally speaking, the 25th Amendment was put into the Constitution for situations just like this.
Yeah.
So he's right as a constitutional matter. He's right as far as kind of a check on the presidency. But it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not going to happen. I mean, there's no way that Kamala Harris is going to convene, Lloyd Austin and the cabinet. It's just not going to happen. So good for Chip to get this talking point out there. It's a good reminder, a good lesson in civics, if nothing else.
Right.
But Kamala Harris is not going to do anything with it.
And I think, and I love Chip as well. I don't go back as far as you do with him, but I mean, I consider him a friend. And so I don't mean any disrespect towards this, but I have to wonder if that was part of his, because look, politically, you don't want them invoking the 25th Amendment. Like, you want Joe Biden running up until we go to vote, right? Like, you don't want them to pull Joe Biden. This is an absolute gift to Donald Trump. But to your point about the Constitution, I mean, like, and also the country, what's best for the country for the next 7 months is obviously not Joe Biden, pretending to run things. And so, but to Chip's point, I'm like, okay, so the vice president would have to convene with the cabinet would have to agree. Then the president would have to say, okay, you're right. And then you're expecting that he doesn't fight it. And all of these things lining up, I'm like, there's no way that you would convince the cabinet, because the cabinet is happy running the show, right? Like, they're happy that Joe Biden is gone. They've known he has been gone for a very long time, and they seemingly enjoy having the power that they do. So you're not convincing, like, even if you wanted to say Kamala would meet with them, there's no way, in my opinion, that she would even be able to convince them, which I wonder that Chip knows and says, you know what, I'm just going to suggest that they do the right thing, because at the end of the day, people are going to be able to look back and say, we suggested that you guys do the right thing and you refused.
Yeah, I mean, Chip Roy is a deeply principled person.
Yeah.
He's not there to carry anyone's water other than the water for the U.S. Constitution. I mean, that's just his mentality. And
if he wasn't, sorry to cut you off for just a second. If he wasn't, he would not have suggested this. Anyone who's just playing politics would never suggest that we remove Joe Biden right now. They would wait.
Totally. But, the one thing I will say is, I wrote a column 2 years ago in July 2022 titled "Resign Joe." And my argument was basically that, politically speaking, it definitely is best for Republicans at this point to go up against Joe Biden. Kamala Harris is terrible, but I guess she'd be slightly politically better for Democrats. I mean, she really is quite terrible, though. But I mean, the point is, from an American patriot perspective, Sarah,
yeah.
I mean, this is just not acceptable. I mean, Xi Jinping was definitely on the phone with the boys last night in Beijing talking about planning that invasion of Taiwan. That Putin's going to go further into Ukraine. Who knows what Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah. I mean, it's just not good. The cartels, I mean, it's just a terrible situation all around.
Yeah, I saw, I know we got to go to break in a second, but I saw someone who posted on the platform formerly known as Twitter something to the effect of, like, anyone who doesn't live in our country who is watching this, please just turn off the TV. This is a private family matter, and we don't want other countries watching this. And I was like, wow, that's so true. Josh, thank you so much. I always appreciate the time. I know that you're very busy, but I appreciate you so much.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right. Thank you. See you soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh, we've got so much to get into. Let me go ahead and thank our sponsors so we can I can welcome my guest here today. And I will say, I do have the next guest that I have is the perfect person to dissect and go through some of these lowlights of the presidential debate. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Flying Ace Spirits. So Flying Ace Spirits is going to give you, well, you have to buy it, but they're going to provide for you amazing whiskey, okay? And while you are drinking that whiskey, you can think about all of the people that you are helping, because when you buy their whiskey, you are actually helping to contribute to scholarships for spouses and children of America's fallen or disabled in combat. See, Flying Ace Spirits is actually partnering with Folds of Honor, and Folds of Honor has been providing these scholarships for a very, very long time, and they've actually provided over like 51,000 scholarships, more than $200 million that they have given to these families in need. Now, Flying Ace Spirits is partnering with them to provide 4 life-changing scholarships to these spouses and families of those who protect our freedom. So it's a win-win, okay? You can go buy whiskey and you can be like, I am actually drinking for a good cause. And when I can drink for, you already sold me at the whiskey, but if you're telling me that I can drink for a good cause, I'm buying double. That's all I'm saying. You can go to flyingacespirits.com. Scan the QR code if you're watching this. Scan the QR code on the screen. It'll take you right there. And when you purchase a bottle of Flying Ace, you're also going to be donating to Folds of Honor. Use the promo code Unfiltered and get free shipping on every order. That is flyingacespirits.com, promo code Unfiltered. I want to welcome to the show John Doyle, Blaze TV contributor, host of Heck Off Commie, and largest Donald Trump stan there ever was.
That's actually, you've spoken the actual truth. We're in a great mood today. We're happy to be here. We're happy to be making America great again. We're feeling good after the debate. So yeah, and I'm glad that, not that I don't like the other shows we do, but what do they say? Three's a crowd. And so as two true loyal MAGA patriots, I am excited to go over some of the highlights from the debate last night.
Literally, well, first of all, I call them lowlights. Well, the Donald Trump ones are highlights. The ones of Joe Biden, half dead, I would call lowlights. But it's funny. This is a true story, John. When I looked at my calendar last night to see who was booked for the show, and I just saw your name on it, and I literally texted my producer and said, if we only have John booked, do not book anyone else. I just want to talk to John.
It's true. I've been around for a while, and I've had to deal with some of these other, what about this guy in Florida? He's doing a great job. And what about, this? And whatever. I'm glad that everyone's back on the Trump train and we can, be serious now. I understand we have to talk about things or whatever, but I'm glad that we can finally, focus on what really matters.
And boy, was it not a stark contrast last night. I just thought, what a I know there's no other way that CNN could have done it, but I'm sure they were thinking in their heads, what a terrible, terrible decision we made having this double box where you literally see right in front of you, America, the stark contrast between Donald Trump very confidently standing there, acknowledging, understanding what's going on, and Joe Biden with his mouth open like,
yeah, there wasn't a single frame that they captured of Biden's face when he did not look like. It wasn't even as though they clipped like one thing and were like, oh, this looks really bad for Joe. At any point, if you looked at his face, he looked, and I've had relatives who have had dementia, so I know this look, but you kind of just like, you keep this sort of like smile where you're like, but he had no idea what was going on. And I guess whatever drugs they gave him were not meeting the mark that they maybe anticipated. Even to do this debate, like the optics probably of doing this were worse than had they just ignored it completely. Because
100%.
The media would run cover for them anyway, be like, oh, well, he doesn't have to debate an insurrectionist. And libtards would be like, yeah, it's not true. But like now that footage of him looking like a vegetable is out there even more so than it already has been.
Which honestly, and we can talk about, just conjecture, but it honestly makes me wonder if this was intentional from some of his staff. I don't know. It makes no sense. You have him gone for a week straight at Camp David, pretending like he's preparing. Clearly, there was no preparation. There was no, what is the perfect concoction that we can give him to make him be able to survive this debate? Like, what the hell were they doing at Camp David, and why did they put him in this position? They could have chosen any excuse and said, you know what, we're going to have to pull out of this debate because XYZ. And the media, to your point, the media would have been like, well, that's perfectly understandable. And they still chose to do this to him, which just makes you wonder. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. CNN was much fairer than I anticipated that they would be. However, there was one moment where they very clearly intended to bail Joe Biden out when his entire brain melted down and he was in the middle of a reboot. And that is, I'm going to go to SOT 6. Okay, this is Joe Biden. I don't even know what his original answer was supposed to be on because he kind of changed topics and he ended up telling us something like, we beat Medicare. Watch.
We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with
Get it out, Joe.
everything we have to do with.
Yes.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
He wasn't done.
He's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. True. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence.
He's so dejected.
What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people, they cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us.
They're like, can we please cut off?
Yes. Is absolutely criminal.
There were multiple times, to your point, John, there were multiple times where the moment they cut, you could tell it was when he kept veering off to the left, which I don't know what the hell was there. If there were, maybe it was a ghost. I don't know. But like maybe it was Joe Biden's soul leaving his body that he was then viewing on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
But it looked really bad. And you could tell whenever they cut it, they were like, oh shit, he's looking off please cut, go away from him.
Yeah.
So that moment, Donald Trump obviously sees the opportunity. And I want to give you enough chances to talk positively about Donald Trump. So I just want to say Joe Biden's terrible performance, I think now, like, we are not talking enough about Donald Trump's great performance. Yep. He was calm. He was measured. He didn't attack. He used just the right moments to create a slam dunk whenever Joe Biden had any of these unforced errors. You saw that one of them when he talked about Medicare. And Trump was like, yeah, you know what? You did destroy Medicare. Let me tell you what else. And he really seized on all of these opportunities without seeming like he was a bully. In fact, if anything, Joe Biden was the one who kept calling him a whiner, which was so bizarre and out of left field. You're not successful in that when you are feeble and weak and soft-spoken. You're just a whiner. And so I just think that it cannot be overstated, and I think perhaps it's overshadowed because of Biden's terrible performance, how great Donald Trump was on that stage.
Yeah, he understood the assignment perfectly, and even handling Joe Biden's like cognitive decline. I think he did that very well because, unfortunately, in this country, we have a democratic process which requires the approval of at least 50% of the population, and we do have about 50% of the population who tends to be more predisposed towards feeling sorry for people, more maybe emotionally wired. Not you, of course, but some of these people. And if he got up there and he were like mogging on this guy for being a vegetable, that would have been bad. Yeah. You don't want to walk into how your enemy is already prepared to portray you as. And so then the headlines would have been like, oh, Trump 78 says Biden 81 is the old great man. Right. And so he just stood back and stood by, and he made the faces that reflected what everybody was thinking. And that was enough. That was sufficient, because even now Democrats are, I mean, immediately after, they were like fact checking Biden. They were like crapping on everything that he said. So everybody understands sort of what was going on here. And Trump too, I mean, in 2016, look, we're never going to go back. The circumstances were different. You needed Trump to get up there and like call Jeb Bush like weak and, you know, call Marco Rubio like a midget. Like you needed that to disrupt the entire establishment. In 2024, he's openly running on mass deportations and firing every libtard in the bureaucracy. That's the deep state. And he's succeeding. He's going to win. So I don't need him necessarily to get up there and like make epic owns the way that maybe we did 8 years ago, because he understands the assignment is now I have to come off as more presidential, more measured, because you've got all of these people who have been primed over the better part of the last decade to look for any reason to be like, oh no, he's unhinged, he's crazy, he's a threat to democracy. And he's like, me? I'm not a threat to democracy. I've got these very measured answers. Also, I'm going to fire all the liberals. I'm going to put them in jail. And we're like, so true. So, and he's going to do it.
Boy, it sure feels that. I mean, I felt a momentum, like it was palpable, the momentum swing. Not that Joe Biden never had much momentum, but I mean, you really felt it in the air after this. So to your point, John, I think the opportunities that he seized on, he did so perfectly. I want to play one of those moments. This is SOT 9, where Joe Biden is talking about the border, trying to pretend like I have it all under control. What are you talking about? And Donald Trump was able to, I think, very successfully say what literally everyone in America was thinking without coming off like a bully. Watch.
Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed me.
No, they didn't. That's a lie.
Position.
That's a lie.
In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was taking.
By the way, the Border Patrol tweeted out
mothers,
live in real time. We did not endorse Biden.
The families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally.
Not true.
It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
That was the kill shot of the entire night, because nobody could go like, oh, come on, you're taking him out of context. You're being too harsh on him. Literally no one in America could say that. It was just everyone was thinking it, and he's like, I have no idea what this old guy just said.
Yeah, when's the last time Biden has had to speak like extemporaneously like that for, what was that, an hour, 2 hours? I mean, I know they had breaks or whatever, but even then, I mean, does he do press conferences? Does he?
Well, they don't go well, so he doesn't do many of them.
So there was a lot riding on last night, and he did not deliver. And as much as, yes, we would like to praise Trump, look, we're in no shortage of that. You know, that is what it is. But Biden doing poorly is what is going to help Donald Trump, because it is sort of a zero-sum game there. And so even if Trump had knocked it out of the park, he doesn't have the media that's willing to advertise that.
Right.
And so it's very important that what clips are being show Joe Biden looking like a confused vegetable, because the debates, I mean, when's the last time we had a presidential debate that like actually mattered? Maybe like the 1980s or something. It's all been it's like theater since then. No one's really discussing the issues. 2016, that's good because we need somebody to get in there and, you know, expose everything for being a circus. Now it's sort of like back to that. Whereas in 2020, it almost was like a mixture of being, you know, maybe more serious, maybe more theatrical. Now I think it's almost back to just purely optics and nothing to do with the actual issues, because first of all, the average person watching the debate has no idea what's going on anyway. They're just like watching because this is what like a smart, informed citizen does or whatever, and they're watching. And so it's good to see the lion in contrast to this like frail, dying gazelle, because it's just human nature. We want the strong horse to win over the weak horse. Commander-in-chief, the cheerleader of the nation. Nobody believes that Biden's that guy. You know, say what you will about Trump, but he is that guy. He is him, and he came off great, just even if it was only, you know, because of that contrast. But even then, the more people see of Trump, the more they love him. The more they see of Biden, they're like, that's kind of... So, yeah, you know, Trump goes around, he gives rallies, he goes into Dairy Queen or whatever, you know, what the hell is a blizzard? The more people see of him, they like him. That's why only people who hate him are people whose exposure to him has been curated by The View, MSNBC, or what have you.
Yes. And even those people have to be watching, you know, if they were watching last night, have to be watching and going, oh no, I cannot possibly vote for that. So just as a reminder, to John's point, you're watching and you're like, I'm voting for that guy. You can go to saramerch.com and get the shirt that I'm wearing right now. You can get the coffee mug if you too are voting for the convicted felon, which again, that was another thing. I know we got to go to break really quick. That was another thing that I loved Donald Trump's response on, which to Steve Deace's point last night on our coverage, he mentioned it took Joe Biden 45 minutes to use the convicted felon line, which we all knew was coming. And it was not effective at that point because everyone was already just aghast at how dead he looked on stage. But to Donald Trump's credit, he just turned it around on him and was like, yeah, your son's a convicted felon. So what?
Yeah.
I thought that was an epic moment for him.
I thought that was unfortunate because when you use the term convicted felon as a pejorative to hurt another person, who you're really insulting is someone like George Floyd. You know, you're not insulting Donald Trump. You're insulting George Floyd. You are insulting large proportions of the African-American community. And to see a white male who's been involved in politics for literally his entire life use that as an insult to denigrate a businessman who has worked with minority business. I had to, honestly, I said I had to go to the bathroom. I threw up. I was so disgusted.
Well, let's not let it be lost on us, John, that this is the man who used the N-word multiple times on the floor of Congress and has said numerous racist things like poor kids are just as smart and capable as white kids.
That makes me so mad that he said those things. You know, it is actually a little bit sad that Eric isn't here, because I was going to ask him if I had permission to use a certain word. But because he is not here to grant me that license, I will err on the side of caution.
Please do.
Last night, if you looked on Twitter and typed in this N-word Biden, Black Twitter was lighting up like, get this N-word Biden off stage. He looks like he's cooked. It's over for him. So, you know, even then, you know, people are understanding sort of what's going on here.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch that shift, which I want to talk about that, but we got to take a break. We'll be right back. So let's talk a little bit about the shift in all of these Democrats. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember 2 weeks ago when they were accusing Republicans of using deep fakes and cheap fakes because we were pointing out literal videos of Joe Biden being just cognitively not there. And they're like, oh, well, these are deep fakes. And now all of a sudden they want to be like, something's wrong with Joe Biden. Oh, really? You think? Let's talk more about that. I want to play a couple clips, though, of just post-debate right afterwards. This first one, let's watch Joe Biden being led by Jill. This is after nobody else is on the stage. Donald Trump has already left because he can walk. Joe Biden having to be helped down step by step on the stairs from his wife, Jill. Let's watch some of that.
President Trump walking off the stage. The first debate of the 2024
and this is zoomed in, so it's a little bit
presidential debate ever now
grainy, but you can still see she has to hold his hand
tonight, along with Aaron Burnett. The first word on
he's
what
hesitating.
Those words might make of it from our political professionals, from our CNN
and she is,
poll and swing state
she's
focus group.
holding on for dear life.
Surrogates, including Vice President Harris,
she's not holding on to his arm because she loves him. She's holding on to his arm so he doesn't fall.
CNN political commentator Scott Jen.
That's so bad.
And that's after, remember, Obama had to lead him by the arm off stage. I mean, this is a long history of people having to help him because he is gone. Homeboy's gone. And then I want to play one more right after the debate. This is SOT 25. This is the equivalent of when I talk to my child, my younger son. He's 3. And I want to play for you Jill Biden telling Joe what a great job he did. Watch.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the...
Look at his face.
And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Lied!
Mommy said I did a good job. Can I have some ice cream?
They are allergic to charisma. Literally, Barack Obama, and even I think the whole idea of him being like a good public speaker was sort of inflated. But I mean, comparing that to what they have now, like who even Gavin Newsom, if they had listened to me on this program like 18 months ago, they could have. I mean, maybe I'm like a DNC plant. Actually, I was like trying to feed them that information. They could have actually switched it, but now it's too late. And I think that, as we were saying during the break, we are so used to losing that we think these people are smarter than they are. And we're like, oh, this must be some chess move. They must have a plan. They literally are stupid. They are too prideful. They are true believers in the sense that they just keep digging and digging and
arrogant
digging.
too.
Which is why even opposition that we see to Biden now, I see this all the time. People will see people crapping on Biden for whatever. And we think that this means that this is good for us. People are waking up. If Biden is not doing what they want, they just view that to be like inadequately or insufficiently executed leftism. And they just want somebody more radical, somebody who is, better than Joe Biden in the sense that they can more precisely execute their like leftist utopian agenda or whatever. And so I don't think that those types of people can wake up. But fortunately, there are a lot of people in the middle who just don't really pay attention to these things. Then when they're exposed to it and see Biden performing the way that he did, they're like, okay, well, obviously, the grocery. I mean, what was that TikTok that Charlie Kirk tweeted the other day where someone like reordered their Walmart grocery thing and it had gone from like $120 to like $400.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are seeing that change.
Exactly.
Like everyone always talks about gas prices. Oh, it's up $1. Okay. When your food is up like 200%, I mean.
Yeah. And people are, they're having to, take out like loans and go into credit card debt for things that they did not have to do that previously. Obviously, the pain is felt with everyday Americans. So I want to play not everyday Americans, these people who called us all sorts of names, crackpots, right-wing nut jobs, conspiracy theorists, all sorts of names because we have been pointing out Joe Biden's mental decline for 6 years now. And now all of a sudden, last night, apparently became too big of a deal to ignore. I want to play SOT 21. This is in the CNN debate post show. John King, the Democrat Party's panicking. Watch.
That right now, as we speak, there is a deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party. It started minutes into the debate, and it continues right now. It involves party strategists, it involves elected officials, it involves fundraisers. And they're having conversations about the president's performance, which they think was dismal, which they think will hurt other people down the party in the ticket, and they're having conversations about what they should do about it. Some of those conversations include, should we go to the White House and ask the president to step aside? Other of the conversations are about, should prominent Democrats go public with that call because they feel this debate was so terrible.
I mean, that was the general consensus from everyone. Van Jones weighed in, same thing, time for a new path forward. Joy Reid, same thing, Democrats are in a panic. You had New York Times columnists calling for Joe Biden to step down and withdraw his nomination. You had Casey Hunt, who just 48 hours ago was kicking Trump spokespeople off her program for daring talk bad about Jake Tapper, who was tweeting out all the Democrats I know are beside themselves watching this.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is these people, and you see this a lot with the right too, there are a lot of people who are in our industry, so to speak, who will refuse to throw their weight behind a particular candidate because it is more advantageous to them career-wise to not hitch your wagon to some guy because, if he gets out of power or if he loses, well, now everyone who is now in power is going to be like, hey, you made our lives more difficult because you were supporting XYZ. And so it's better to be like a golden retriever and just get along with everybody. And I think that's kind of what's going on here is you're seeing the Democrats understand the writing on the wall. Insofar as Joe Biden exists, I mean, he's the last, that kind of Democrat. Whatever is succeeding him is going to be something that is much more radical because, too, you have the radical young activists of the party who are now graduating with their MPPs and they're starting to work for the Democrats. And they are sort of at war with the swamp elders, as I like to call them, for control of that party. Yeah. And right now, it is literally too late for them to bring somebody else in.
Right.
Because, I mean, the DNC rules as they are, they would have had to have done that, months ago. Now, he couldn't get on the ballot in pretty much any state, I don't even think, if there were a new person who were to step in. And the people who are in charge of changing those rules is this committee within the DNC, which is made up of a dozen people or something. Those people are all Biden loyalists. Mm-hmm. Those people are all there because Biden more or less appointed them, so to speak. And so they understand that if they lose their power, well, whoever succeeds Biden is not going to give them those same positions. Right. Because, you were opposed to us and now I don't have to take care of you. And people who work in politics, I mean, that's like a cushy job for them. You basically do nothing and then you get, black car service, 4-star hotels. It's the coolest they've ever felt. It's their West Wing Veep fantasy. And the same thing with Biden. He has to hold on to power too, because if not, who's going to pardon Hunter?
That's a great point. And to your point, I know we got to take a break. We're running out of time. But to your point, the Heritage Foundation Oversight Project is already saying if they try to withdraw and put someone else in, they are going to focus on several different states and challenge that legally within the courts because there are certain rules in certain states. Wisconsin only allows withdrawal for death. Nevada only allows changes. There are no changes after the fourth Friday in June unless the nominee dies or is declared insane. Actually, he could be declared insane. I don't know. Georgia, no votes counted if withdrawal occurs less than 60 days before the election. So that will be challenged in the courts, even if they do try to do that. So, all right, we got to take a break. I want to remind you guys, go get your tickets to see Sound of Hope. Okay, this is Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. It's a new movie from Angel Studios, and it tells the story of this church. And these people who 22 families from a rural black church linked arms and courageously adopted 77 of the most difficult to place children in the local foster care system. It's a wonderful story. It needs to be shared. You can go to order your tickets at angel.com/Sara. That is Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. If you liked Sound of Freedom, it's made by the same people, the same studio. So go support them, angel.com/Sara. Got a couple more clips for you here, John. This is today. Okay, so everyone's calling for Joe Biden to drop out. Is he going to? No, he's already committed to a second debate in September, which Democrats are like, no, God, please stop. I want to play Joe Biden today on the campaign trail. Let's listen to Joe himself talking to the crowd. Watch.
I'm serious. Failing, I don't know, a president wouldn't trade places with America in a heartbeat.
What?
He's dead wrong. America's not a losing nation. America's winning.
Why are you so
stand here today, I can
angry?
honestly say I'm never more optimistic about America's future in my whole career. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America.
What? What?
That is what democracy looks like. It's like you got this old guy who has no idea what he's talking about, and then they're clapping like seals, and it's just this disgusting fat audience. And so, yeah,
this is America. This is America.
Yeah, the United States.
The United States of America.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, one more here. This is Jill Biden talking at the rally with this just disastrous dress that says vote all over it. But I want you to pay attention to Joe Biden's face in the background as Jill is trying to amp up the crowd, because we all know Joe Biden ain't doing the trick. Watch.
Here in North Carolina and across America, who are working hard to find a secure place in the middle class. I saw in him then the same character that I see in him today. And even though he has faced unimaginable tragedies, his optimism is undaunted. His strength is unshakable. His hope is undeterred. I saw in him then the same character that I see in him today. And even though he has faced unimaginable tragedies, his optimism is undaunted.
The tragedy, Jill, is that you're doing this to him.
Yeah.
That is the unthinkable tragedy that is happening right now, is that you are doing this to this man. This is clearly elder abuse, and she seems to be thrilled about it.
Yeah, it's like humiliating. You know, Joe Biden was like a relatively intelligent senator, I think. You know, you can go back and watch the way he would speak 30 years ago, and he was intelligent. He had, you know, a good charisma about him. And to allow whatever legacy that would have been in Democrat circles to become this, I don't know if it's out of desperation or pride, probably some hybrid. It's just like completely, and too, I mean, that's his wife.
Yeah.
This is honoring your spouse. You're supposedly so Catholic. You're honoring your spouse by allowing him to be basically like, you know, ritually humiliated just on a human level by having him go out there and be paraded, and everybody knows. I mean, imagine the way that his constituents are speaking about him. You think that we're mean. We don't even spend time around the guy. Imagine what the Secret Service is saying about him.
I think like the real tragedy, the thing that actually does make me sad about this is, I've said this before, nobody in Joe Biden's family loves him enough to say that's enough.
Yeah.
We're done here. Nobody loves, he has been the guy that they all use for money and power and influence this entire time, that nobody loves him enough to be like, you know what, the charade's up. It's not worth the money. It's not worth the crack if you're Hunter. Like, it's not worth it. And somehow he has created a legacy in which they don't even care about him. And I do find that part to be sad. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. John, you just pointed out before we go, Barack Obama tweeted out, bad debate nights happen.
Yeah, you can't.
Trust me, I know. But this election is still a choice between someone who has fought for ordinary folks his entire life and someone who only cares about himself. Blah, 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 blah. If you have to admit that was a bad debate night and it was the very first, like, y'all are done.
Sorry, I had to compose myself for a second. Every woman in my life picks on me for spending too much time on Twitter, and you are the first to appreciate that. And so thank you for that. It makes me feel very good about myself.
You're welcome. I'm just here to support you, John.
I appreciate it. And support the president and the convicted felon. Get the shirt.
Convicted felon, SarahMerch.com. Thank you, John. Sarah 10 saves 10%.